it is not very well known that they have small rockets at the bottom here that impart to it a gyroscopic motion, like the wheels on a bike, or a bullet from a rifled rifle. That gyroscopic motion rotation helps targeting it to its target. And of course, if it can be intercepted, then the decoys are added so as to confuse the interceptors in choosing which one are actual or decoy re-entry vehicles. The arms race started, of course, with in the United States with moving from the kiloton level of energy release to the megaton level, and that was definitely an arms race. And the Great Britain or the UK did not stop seeing the United States having nuclear weapons, so they immediately found themselves developing them too. They developed fission weapons, and fission weapons using the implosion process, as you could see here, the igniters, and they added to it tritium, and they show lots of detail about their design here. You could see it's a plutonium device because they're using an implosion, but they could also use uranium-235. When they added the tritium and deuterium to it, they increased the the yield to the level of the 720 kiloton device. So it's somehow, yes, we can call it a thermonuclear device because they did add deuterium and tritium. That did not stop there. Of course, other nations, they show us so much detail about their design here. And you could see here the primary shown here in spherical form, and the secondary, which would be the...
Professor, we cannot see the shared screen.
Oh. All right. Thank you for warning me. I'll figure it out. I'll have to stop sharing. The video is running, the share screen. Share. Does it show up now?
Yes, it does. I can see it.
So we corrected it. It's in the lecture notes, so please follow it in the lecture notes. I'm talking about the British design of what they call a thermonuclear weapon. This would be the primary fission part of it, and this would be the secondary part of it, which would be the fusion, and then followed by a casing there, which would be uranium-238. So it's a multi-stage amplifier, showing here again in more detail. That would be the lithium-6 deuteride fusion fuel. Remember, I did mention in the last lecture, so when these thermonuclear devices were first exploded, they thought that the reaction occurs only with the isotope of lithium-6. So they had to separate lithium-6 from lithium. But then I made the point that there was no need for this, and they discovered it because lithium-7 also can produce tritium and an extra neutron, enhancing the fusion reaction. So that would be here. You could see here now the primary spherical in shape, and they have a uranium-238 temper that turns it into a multi-stage amplifier. Fission, fusion, and fission back again. And this, in that case, they reached the megaton rather than the million-ton level here. This is the assumed design of a staged thermonuclear weapon by the British, named the WE-117B missile, nuclear missile. So very quickly, the UK joined the United States in becoming a nuclear power state. That didn't stop France. Immediately followed also by exploding their own nuclear devices in the island of Tahiti in the southern hemisphere in the Pacific Ocean, and also they tested their weaponry in the Sahara Desert in what was their colony at the time in Algeria. Okay, well, now that became a club here, the United States, Russia, the UK, and France, and then immediately comes India, and also developed its own delivery vehicles launched, from, as you could see here, from a ship, the Danush missile. It became like a domino effect. Pakistan developed its own delivery vehicle for nuclear missiles. India depended more on the use of plutonium as a weapon material, whereas Pakistan and North Korea depended initially on the use of uranium-235. This is the latest member of the club, the nuclear club, the North Korea. And I'm showing this these pictures because of something interesting. You could see here that they have definitely a thermonuclear device. So they have a part, and they have it in the shape of the peanut shape. They have definitely a fission primary and a fusion secondary. It seems that this is a particle accelerator that gets its energy from what they call the physics component of the device. And the physics component is really nothing than then a storage capacitor's storage. It stores an electrical field, and it discharges the energy into a gun barrel here that accelerates deuterium isotopes or tritium isotopes into to start the reaction. As they're showing it, the different information we have on the web does not show that physics part, which is the condensers or the initiators of the implosion in the device. However, they made a mistake here. Maybe they showed that diagram on the wall, and people had fun maximizing it, or simply putting it into Photoshop. And you could see now the actual design of a thermonuclear device, and they are trying to show that it is a workable device. Indeed, you can tell it's a workable device. Not shown in the other rest of the open literature is the physics component here. Then you have the fission component apparently here, because it's getting the particle accelerator into the source, and that would be the fusion part, and it's in the form of a peanut the design. And it is also yield adjustable, 120 kiloton, and definitely they're using the Ulam-Teller configuration, except that it is not a cylindrical fusion component, but it is a peanut level. Not only do they have workable thermonuclear devices, but they also have a delivery vehicle, one Sound 14 mobile launch system. So they have not just a fission capability, they do have indeed a thermonuclear capability. All right, those launch capabilities in different from different sources, like from aircraft, from missiles, or from submarines, are supplemented by a great protection of the leadership. The elite group ruling these countries are all shielded against being killed or destroyed in a nuclear exchange underground in basically bunkers under mountains. This is one of those bunkers that was dedicated to President John F. Kennedy. And look at the thickness of the blast walls here, the thickness of the walls into a tunnel drilled in a hill or a mountain. And it's called Peanut Island near Riviera Beach, Florida. And basically that was where President Kennedy would be protected. Thermonuclear weapons can be extremely destructive. This is the size of a fireball on top of its a whole troop assembly, and it covers the whole thing. When it touches the ground, all these vehicles here would be destroyed and on fire. If it is exploded up higher in the atmosphere, The shock wave does not reach the ground, so we don't have as many fission products. We get only the fission products from the material of the device itself, but it generates what's called an electromagnetic pulse. An electromagnetic pulse would be so strong and so powerful, almost like lightning discharge, but at a much higher intensity. It can burn all the electronics in over a whole continent. So a single electromagnetic pulse over the United States would turn the United States back to the Stone Age. There would be no refrigeration, no water supplies, no sewage, no cars. All the electronic devices would be destroyed. And that's why it is mandated to the phone system, AT&T, for instance, to build radiation hardened, it's called. Engineers, electrical engineers design the communication system in such a way that they can withstand an electromagnetic pulse. The testing in the atmosphere released quite a bit of fission products affecting the whole globe, and it was discovered that some of the isotopes released in thermonuclear devices affected the deer and in the northern hemisphere. So by international agreement, testing in the atmosphere was banned. That didn't stop the nuclear power states to test their weapons underground. So you could see here a test in the Nevada desert test site. The weapon was exploded underground. It vaporized the rock, it created a cavity, and then the cavity collapses, and you could see the collapse of the cavity right there. The tremendous amount of energy released from nuclear devices suggested their use in a peaceful application. And the name of it was the Plowshare Program, in reference to the Bible, the Holy Bible, where the Israelites getting into the Holy Land turned their swords into plowshares. So instead of swords for war, they turned them into plowshare for agriculture or peaceful applications. So some civil nuclear engineering processes were proposed, building harbors, canals, a sea level canal, for instance, for Panama, an alternate Suez Canal in the Middle East, dam construction, and the process of hydraulic fracking or hydraulic fracturing today has its origin in the use of nuclear devices. They were used in two experiments in the United States and several experiments in the old Soviet Union, in which nuclear explosives were exploded at a site in Colorado. In fact, the continental United States, an experiment was called Gas Buggy, and another one called Rallison, where nuclear devices were exploded in natural gas fields that were getting depleted, and the cracking and the formation of a larger effective radius for the well increased the production. Other countries started jumping on the idea, particularly India, and because of the fear of then all nations developing nuclear weapons under the pretext or the umbrella of using it for peaceful applications, the Plowshare Program was basically canceled. And but it is a feasible program for future applications. This is one of the experiments in that case in the United States. It's called the Sedan experiment. You could see the size of the crater that could be an artificial lake for storing water, fresh water maybe, or for building a harbor. And you could see the size of it by you're just looking at the size here of some trucks and individuals on the side. That was 105 kiloton equivalent explosion in 1962. You can detect any underground explosions all over the world by the release of two isotopes, argon-37 and cesium-135. And so you could see here the ideas of using a nuclear explosive for peaceful applications. This is would be a way of mining copper. So if you have a copper deposit very deep underground and you cannot reach it from the surface, you would explode a nuclear device in it, fracture the rock, create cracks in the medium. And in fact, in the simulation of oil reservoir, that would be a fascinating thing here, because you increase the well radius from the few inches to the meters size. Initially, the explosive would melt the rock, create a cavity, and fracture the medium around it. And then, of course, you can enhance the recovery of petroleum, for instance. Only 20% at most can be extracted of petroleum in deposits, but you can use it for leaching minerals. So, for instance, if you have a copper deposit very deep underground, you could crack the medium, inject an acid, dissolve the copper, for instance, and then pump it out of the device. A futuristic application that's considered as terraforming is reconnecting the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. That was a situation that happened 22 million years ago, where the two oceans were interconnected. And in that case, Antarctica was open land. It didn't have the miles of ice existing there today. The Arctic Ocean was open waters. So the Earth enjoyed a very, very mild temperate climate. So if we get a situation of runaway heating, a greenhouse effect, this is suggested that on a paper that you can read as a way to reconnect the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean by exploding a row of nuclear explosives to open up an open canal. That was also suggested for an alternate Suez Canal. And it is a last resort if humanity is faced by a situation where there is no other way. And countries that would allow this to occur on their land would be basically compensated for their helping the rest of humanity. In addition to these possible applications, international treaties were signed to control the spread of nuclear weapons. The first one is the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, and that's an international treaty that would ban all nuclear explosions, whether for military or for peaceful applications. It has never been ratified by all the signatories, including the United States, and many potential nuclear capable countries have not signed it, except North Korea have abided by their interpretation of the treaty since 1999. The United States interprets the treaty as it to allow only zero yield tests. So moratorium on full-scale testing now was announced by President George W. Bush. And the most palpable reminder of that arms race in the National Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas that you can visit if you find your way to Las Vegas. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty did not, in the air and underground, did not stop some clandestine testing. And Brazil had a weapons program, but they canceled it. So did South Africa in conjunction with Israel. South Africa canceled its nuclear weapons program, but Israel had definitely, according to the CIA, a clandestine program, and a test was conducted by South Africa and Israel in the southern Pacific, and it was detected by a satellite launched by the United States. You see how large that satellite is. It's called the Vela surveillance satellite. Vela is sail in Albanian. And the way that you can detect a nuclear explosion from the process of lightning is that a nuclear explosion has two pulses. One of them comes out from the initial gamma rays and the electromagnetic pulse that comes from the fission process, from neutrons in that case, and the second one from gamma rays emitted from the enclosure that surround the weapon. So definitely there was 2 pulses, so that suggests the Vela satellite detected them of gamma rays and light, and so it was a nuclear test in the South Pacific. The test was corroborated at the time of President Carter by megaphones run by the United States Navy in the oceans, so that those megaphones follow any kind of ship. Every ship has its own signal from the noise of the propellers. So the explosion was both detected by the Vela satellite and the megaphones in the ocean. So some countries, of course, as I suggest, has secret agreements, and they are having a nuclear weapons program in clandestine ones in that case. The United States did not follow just the test ban treaty, and under the process, the International Atomic Energy Commission was created, the IAEA, and the Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed. It's designated as NPT, and as I suggested, the United States goes beyond that in what people like to name as a counter-proliferation regime, replacing the non-proliferation regime. In the non-proliferation regime, countries commit themselves not to develop nuclear weapons in return for help for the civilian applications of nuclear energy, with the commitments of the nuclear power states to eliminate their nuclear weapons, which hasn't happened, as we all know. And the United States follows what's called the counter-proliferation regime, where you would a country would be subject to regime change. Take the example of Iraq and Libya. If there is any suspicion of the development of nuclear weapons. So in that case, we are living in a persistence contemporary Cold War, and the doctrine followed in that case what's called the mutual assured destruction, the MAD, a very good acronym here that represents the situation. It's a MAD situation for countries to start a nuclear war. Nuclear fleets of airplanes, of missiles are operational. The nuclear power states did not abide by their commitment to eliminating nuclear weapons. You could see bombers here, and recently there was a show of force with North Korea, with a B-2 bomber shown here, the B-52, and the B-1B. The names are the Lancer, the Spirits for the B-2, and the Stratofortress at Guam, flown from the United States to Guam in the Pacific Ocean. And of course, the missiles can be fired from other airplanes, like this one is an all-weather over-the-horizon Harpoon anti-ship missile here carried by aircraft. And of course, the stealth bomber, the B-2, is shown here being air refueled, has a range of the hundreds of in the thousands of kilometers. Shown here is a B-2 stealth bomber dropping a Mach B-83 thermonuclear warhead. So we are still in under the umbrella of mutual assured destruction by the different nuclear power states. This shows here a ground launch missile using the W-84 warhead. It has been inactivated, but many of the missiles are now underground ICBMs. For the United States, it's a Minute 3, and it's being lowered in its silo at different parts on the western part of the country. This shows here a launch of that Minuteman. Remember, these land-based missiles are ICBMs or intercontinental ballistic missiles. Each one of them would have MIRV vehicles that they can carry up to 12 to 16 of independently targeted particles. So this is a test of the Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missile. This shows you how huge this is. Look at the gentleman standing there next to the LGM-118. They name it Peacekeeper, and it's armed with the W-87. They have designations, warheads, not only on land, but also in the sea with submarines. That's a part of the triad of the United States missile defense system. You have missiles based on land, missiles launched by airplanes, and actually bombs, not necessarily just missiles. And also the Trident missile is a different missile that's launched by submarines. You could see here, and it's not carried just as individual missiles. This shows here a Tomahawk launched from underwater. The submarine doesn't have to surface to launch its missiles. At some point, they had small devices in the range of the 20 tons only, not kilotons, not thousands of tons, that would be used by the Army, and that has been decommissioned. It's not being used anymore. It would encourage small wars, and some negatives have happened at some point in modern time. In March 2021, there was a START treaty. It's and was renewed for 5 years, and it would have expired in 2026 if it continued. The relations between the United States and Russia have deteriorated. So President Putin in February 21st, 23, gave it the final blow and canceled it with a dispute with the United States. START stands for the Strategic Arm Treaties. So some of the treaties that control nuclear weapons are unfortunately have been canceled with disputes on the yield of the weapons that would be positioned, particularly in Europe, surrounding the new Commonwealth of Independent State that replaced the USSR. So now we are living under the mutually assured destruction, the MAD doctrine. The whole world has a filter that can end up humanity by a nuclear war. And both the Soviet Union, the Commonwealth of Independent States, and the United States have more weapons to destroy all the cities in the world several times over. I'm repeating it, several times over. So it's a mad situation indeed from the perspective of the acronym Mutual Assured Destruction as well as reality. It's a mad doctrine. Different warheads have been developed. Some of them have been decommissioned, but they are given all kinds of names. The Hiroshima Little Boy, which was a uranium-235 device, had 15 kiloton of TNT equivalent energy release. But if you are using cruise missiles like the Tomahawk, you'll find that the yield is smaller, 5 kiloton, which makes it unfortunately more feasible in trying to be used in a small nuclear exchange. And the Russians are, in fact, threatening that in the war of the Ukraine, if their mainland is threatened in any way, that they can, or they will have, according to their military doctrine, they would use small nuclear weapons. But there are larger ones that go to the 100 kiloton level of energy release. So you can find also the B83 that is 1.2 megaton, 1,200 kilotons in general. The Air Force has its own weapons, and they have at surface to surface. Some of them have been retired, some are still being used. And as I suggested here, you can use the B-52 or the B-2 aircraft, or you can use the Minuteman ICBMs, or you can use cruise missiles for delivery. So the situation is very distressing so far. We can write a very simple equation for the probability of being able to join the nuclear club. The members of the club do not accept new members. So the probability of a nation joining the nuclear club is proportional to 1 over n. Very simple equation we can say is equal to a constant over n, where n is the number of existing members. So the existing members try to diligently to not allow any other countries to join the club. And that has been shown is that an interesting cartoon here. The nuclear club that exists today meets, and they are not abiding by the non-proliferation treaty. And any country that tries to join it, like Iran here, is faced by reserves the right to to refuse service to anyone. Anyone is not allowed to join the nuclear club. They all, however, we have many countries that have signed the non-proliferation treaty. According to the Federation of American Scientists, the estimating number of strategic warhead by the Russians is 2,800, the United States 2,200, France 300, China 180, the UK 160. Some countries, as I suggested, did not sign the non-proliferation treaty, like Israel is suggested to have 200 to 400 warheads, Pakistan 60, India 60, North Korea 10. And that is as of 12/17 in general. The strategic warheads, which is not the same as the tactical, okay, so that's another statistic here. That's from the Federation of American Scientists. And the strategic warheads by Russia, 7,000, the United States 6,800, France 300, 270. Okay, so that really from 1 year to the other. But the great concentration of nuclear weaponry is really in the United States, 6,800, and Russia, 7,000. As I suggested, the numbers there are tremendously large. They're not necessary for protecting a country against nuclear attack. France has only 300, China 270, the UK 215, Pakistan 130, India 120, Israel 80, and North Korea, they have a few. We don't know exactly how many. The types of strategic warheads, now it's really the main concern is a nuclear exchange between the nations of NATO and Russia. And you could see that in submarine launched ballistic missiles, NATO has an overwhelming advantage over Russia, but in non-strategic and defensive forces, Russia have a huge advantage over NATO. So we don't want them to get in conflict with each other. It could be extremely destructive. This is a replica of the largest thermonuclear weapon ever exploded. The name given to it was a Tsar Bomba. It was developed in the old Soviet Union, and it was designed to deliver 100 million tons, 100 megatons. And at the last moment, the scientists reduced the yield from the 100 megaton to 50 megaton. And they were worried about the shock wave downing the plane that delivered it. As a matter of fact, so they reduced the yield to 58 megaton, and that's a replica in a museum. It They were worried also about the shockwave. It was exploded over Siberia, affecting all the way to Moscow. It was carried on, ironically, a Tupolev 95 Bear bomber, and Tupolev is a plane that was constructed in, of all places, the Ukraine. And that is the plane that apparently delivered the 58 megaton TNET Star bomber. The United States exploded, is abiding to a certain degree with a the test ban treaty, and that is the last device that was tested by the United States underground in 1992. It went July 1992 on the 23rd of. You notice here that it has a cylindrical shape. It was being downloaded underground for a nuclear test underground, and it has definitely the Ulam-Teller cylindrical configuration. The United States and many other countries still have what is called, quote unquote, a stewardship program. They test their nuclear weapons, but not on real nuclear weapons, but they are simulated on supercomputers. That is Sierra, read it backwards here, a mirror image. IBM supercomputer, the Lawrence Livermore Lab, is air-gapped, meaning what? Meaning that it is not connected to the outside world, to the internet, where hacking can occur into it. And the last nuclear devices in the United States is the W-80 warhead. And basically, nuclear weapons are a Pandora's box. It has been opened, can be closed on the world. So the knowledge about how the physics of how to create those dreadful devices, in fact, they are not wonderful in any way. They are dreadful. They can end up becoming a filter that our humanity cannot go through and would be the end of our civilizations. And this is not pie in the sky. This is real. There have been false alarms. There have been system malfunctions, and there have been near misses. When there is a near miss, the terminology is a broken arrow. And there was a heroic event by a smart person, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov. He stood guard on a satellite-based missile launch detection system, and the system detected a launch from the United States. And his duty was to respond by a launch of Russian missiles against the United States. That would have been a big error, but he was a smart gentleman, and he was, of course, very much praised for it. He reasoned that if the United States would attack Russia with a nuclear exchange, they would not launch a single missile. They would launch a whole volley of hundreds of missiles. So he did not respond to the alarm and saved the world, and he was decorated in that case. Another instance where an error could have started a nuclear war was the Cuban Missile Crisis at the time of President Kennedy. And again, another Russian naval officer basically did not respond to what appeared as being an attack by the United States. Accidents have happened. And this is an accident that happened over the continental United States. This was a thermonuclear device. An accident happened to a B-52 traveling over North Carolina. The B-52 fell off the sky, but before, two of thermonuclear weapons were released. And the arming sequence was very close to having it explode. Since then, the United States does not allow the flight of any airplanes carrying any nuclear weapons over the continental United States. This one had the parachute open up, so it was retrieved. Another weapon basically delivered itself, dug itself too deep into the ground. So the United States Air Force bought the ground around it and simply set up a fence. And if you travel to Goldsboro, North Carolina, you'll find that sign, B-52 transporting 2 nuclear bombs crashed on January 1961. Widespread disaster averted. 3 crewmen died 3 miles south. That is a B-52. There has been other nuclear devices that have been lost over Spain in the Atlantic Ocean and off the coast of North Carolina. Were jettisoned by airplanes, and they basically are still rusting there in the sediment in the oceans. We still live under that threat of nuclear weapons, and it is clear that it is not, hopefully it's not probable, but it is very possible. And this is exemplified on how the President of the United States travels. He's accompanied by an officer carrying here a bag. The bag is called the nuclear football. This is basically computers. He's boarding a presidential helicopter, and it has the codes for the President of the United States to launch a nuclear missile. There has been the officer carrying that nuclear football had a altercation in a visit by one of our presidents to China, in that they would not let him go with the president, and that created a diplomatic confrontation in that case. So in that case, the world is living the threat of mutual assured destruction. And the United States, in fact, has changed its policy on the use of nuclear weapon in 2018, very recently. China has a policy of not being the first users of nuclear weapons. And but the United States was also in that situation, but the first use United States policy has been changed in 2018, and into a situation of what is called the nuclear primacy, and it allowed for the use of bloody nose operations in a nuclear posture review. So the United States gives itself the right to use nuclear weapon when it so chooses to. Some other countries, as I suggested, are committed to the non-first use of nuclear weapons. The Russian or Commonwealth of Independent States has also a policy of no first use, except if the mainland is of the Commonwealth of Independent States is under threat of being under an existential stress. So we are living, unfortunately, the whole of humanity in a revived on race. And that happened very clearly, was made clear starting not 2022, but really the Ukrainian war, but much earlier in 2014 with the United States organizing a coup or a change of government in the Ukraine. That was followed by 2018 in a speech by Russian President Putin. And he suggested 6 wish list the new weapon systems that revives the arms race. The first one is the Sarmat, or the RS-28. That is a missile that has a range of 6,200 miles. And compare that to the problem that we started with earlier. We said that the missile can go around half the perimeter, the circumference of the Earth. But that 6,200 miles would mean that the missile can be launched from the Commonwealth of Independent State land and go all the way around the Earth from the south and circumvent the NORAD protection system that we have facing an incoming missile from the Russian land from the north. So it would attack the United States from the south. And you could see here, they show it with nerved warheads, and it can carry 15 independent maneuverable hypersonic nuclear armed reentry vehicles and decoys. So no existing or planned missile system can intercept them. No planned missile defense system can intercept them. So both the Russian cities and the American cities are the mercy of each other. The system has a mobile, as you could see on the vast expanse of the Russia, and it's a mobile system with other than the land-based ones. Okay, they are land-based, in fact, but their location is difficult to find, and they have those 15 MIRV. Each one of them can attack 15 targets. So the main characteristic of the Sarmat weapon system is it's a heavy ICBM. It can use a wide range of nuclear devices. It has a short booster stage. It is capable of penetrating missile and air defenses, and has an unlimited global flight range, and it is liquid fueled. The other new wish list of the Russians in the new arms race is what they call the Burevestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile, and that is a missile that is low-flying and steady, and it has a nuclear reactor as a power to power it. So if you use a nuclear fuel rather than chemical fuel, the range becomes almost infinite, and it can loiter for a long time, meaning it stays airborne for a long time before reaching its destination. And this shows here, is it a Sukhoi or a MiG airplane with some of those, it's a MiG-31, and they equip it with what's called the Kinzhal for Dagger or Iskander compared missile. And what happens is that the missile is connected to the bottom of the airplane, shown here and here, either a Sukhoi or a MiG plane. The MiG or the Sukhoi give an initial speed for the missile that is supersonic, because the planes themselves can reach supersonic speed, and then the missiles reach a high altitude into the atmosphere. So they are not intercontinental ballistic missiles, but they reach a very high speed. We don't know. They are supersonic, definitely, and unfortunately, they have been using them against in the war in the Ukraine. And they show here the nuclear powered missile here, and you could see that they suggest that it can evade radar of ships that Aegis destroyers that the United States has for protection in the world oceans and around Japan. And they show pictures here of that nuclear reactor powered missile, and initially it is launched with a chemical rocket, but then it is run by a nuclear engine. So that is, it seems that they had an accident in the type of a missile, and many of the scientists and technicians perished in that accident. Maybe it has been a hydrogen explosion. And they suggest it doesn't use a conventional jet engine, but it uses supersonic combustion ramjet, where the heat, the shock wave heats the fuel and is heated in a nuclear reactor right here, and that would be a name for it is a scramjet. And shown back again here is a Kinzhal missile at the bottom of it's an air-launched cruise missile. And the Russian had also a third wish list, which is shown here. And in fact, apparently they show a picture of it being constructed, which is simply a kinetic energy device. It doesn't need to have any nuclear explosive or chemical explosive launched from the upper atmosphere. Its kinetic energy is enough to destroy any target on Earth. And North Korea, just a few last week, in fact, we're talking about developing such weapons. They equip it with a cloud surrounding it, as shown in that diagram here, maybe with a gas like some material, cesium, maybe being evaporated, and the plasma that would be created would prevent its detection by radar. The third wish list in the new arms race is the Kinzhal or Dagger Sir Iskander air launch cruise missile, and a fourth one is a hypersonic dodging boot glide cruise missiles. They call it the Avant-Garde. That's the one that supposedly can change its trajectory so that cannot be intercepted. And a second nuclear wish list is a drone, but it's a submarine drone, and they name it the Poseidon nuclear powered drone submarine. The idea is that you get a very high yield device, and you create an explosion that creates a tsunami that would destroy any harbor or coastal city in the United States. So according to Sakharov, a Russian Academy of Science members, he wrote in his memoirs, quote, "After testing the big product, I was worried that for him there is no good carrier. Bombers do not count, they are easily clocked down. That is, in a military sense, our work was wasted. I decided that such a carrier could be a large torpedo launched from a submarine. I imagined that it would be possible to develop a straight flow water stream atomic jet engine for such a torpedo. The purpose of the attack from a distance of several hundred kilometers would be the enemy's ports. So war on the sea is lost if the ports are destroyed. In this, we are assured by the sailors. The body of such a torpedo can be made very durable. It will not be afraid of mines and fence network." And some people suggest that the Russians, in fact, have some dormant examples of those torpedoes. I show different pictures of them here. That's unmanned, obviously. And AI would be used, artificial intelligence, and they supplement it with an actual construction of one of those torpedoes. They call it the Gravesend 2 RPM nuclear powered drone under construction. And this, in that case, is named an unmanned underwater vehicle, UUAV, the same as on UAVs, which is unmanned aerial vehicles. This is underwater vehicle. This is a document that shows how it would be carried either at the bottom of a submarine or inside the submarine itself. And you could see the word here, reactor. So it is driven by a nuclear reactor with the nuclear device in the front. If it's a 1 megaton, it's a tsunami, according to Kurtachev, and they show more detail of it. And the information, they have a name for it, the Canyon device, and they compare it to the size of a normal torpedo or an ICBM. The Canyon would be, let's see, 24 meters in length, and they show different shapes of it, but you could see here the Radura sign. This means that that is a nuclear warhead driven by a nuclear reactor. And in fact, it seems that it's one here shown under construction, and the target would be our main port cities like San Diego. They suggest that a submarine that is dormant would launch it, and the tsunami from 100 kilometers away would destroy a whole port facility, hence any possible activity of war in general. The sixth wish list by Mr. Putin is also a mobile land-based laser systems that would target airplanes or missiles. The United States has a similar system, but it is it has been, in fact, it has been deployed already on surface ships, and some people suggest it's also deployed on airplanes. With a laser system, you have a speed of light in a straight line of defense system, and but it cannot work under bad weather conditions, obviously, in that case. So here is the situation that we have today. The main treaty that is used, adopted by the rest of the world, is a Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Try to remember the acronym, NPT. It was signed by 190 countries in 1970. It commits countries which signed up, including the United States, Russia, France, and the UK and China, to reducing their stockpiles, and bars others from acquiring nuclear weapons. India, Pakistan, and Israel did not sign up, and North Korea was a member of the treaty. It withdrew from it in 2003. The United States, Russia, and the UK have been reducing their inventory. Russia and the USA are trying to extend their last remaining nuclear arms agreement. It's called the New START Treaty, signed in 2010. It limits the number of long-range nuclear warheads that they can possess to 1,550, but they did not achieve this. This has been replaced, well, complemented, I should say, because the NPT is still valid, by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It's called the ICAN. And let me see here, in 2017, the treaty needed to have 50 members that ratify it, meaning that they sign it through or pass it through their national assemblies. And Honduras became the 50th country. So now it is in force. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons described the 50th ratification as heralding, quote, a new chapter for nuclear disarmament. And so that is a hope for humanity, not to end up into a destructive filter that ends up humanity by the effort of nuclear war. And I hope that the people in Washington, D.C. and in Moscow would refrain from threatening each other in the use of nuclear weapons. Somehow it posed itself. I don't know what happened. Some event happened. I don't know what it is. Okay, so let us continue that chapter. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Still, the threat of nuclear war exists. And your screen sharing, yeah, I know that. This shows NATO reporting of what they call the Satan Russian ICBM. You could see the size of it, quite large. It carries 18 to 20 megatons of energy, with 10 MIRV or independent re-entry vehicles. Each one of those warheads would be about 750 kiloton of energy, almost 1 megaton. So that is not an army kind of weapon. This is meant to destroy population centers. So it is basically it doesn't follow the Geneva Convention of not targeting civilians in time of war. It's not only the Russians and the NATO countries that are a threat to each other in terms of nuclear war, but China has joined the nuclear club on a large scale. So the Chinese DF-31A on parade in 2009. And the Chinese have, you could see the size of that land-based ICBM here, Dongfeng ICBM in its silo. And another picture of the nuclear weapons in NATO countries, the missile silo at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Germany. So NATO countries are all equipped with nuclear weapons. Just last week, Russia has also equipped other countries with tactical nuclear weapons. In that case, it's Belarus. And that is an interesting publication in a Chinese newspaper showing the targeting of United States cities by Chinese nuclear weapon. They show the fallout or the radiation that would affect American cities if attacked from the West. And you could see that the radiation would come in all the way to cities in Wisconsin. And those circles here are considered basically as a target. And it is a farce because they are targeting non-military targets. And in a nuclear war, you target military targets only. This is Green Bay in Wisconsin, Lansing, Michigan, Albany, New York, Manchester, New Hampshire, Augusta, Maine. And the only thing that I can think of in Green Bay, Wisconsin is Packers football team. The Chinese have constructed something very interesting that they call the underground Great Wall. Is that a system of tunnels underground instead of having nuclear devices on nuclear submarines like the United States that are hard to detect as their position. They have tunnels underground, and they move their nuclear weapons so that it's hard to detect where they are, except maybe with ground penetrating radars. They suggest that they have 500 ICBMs in around 100 silos connected by that huge underground tunnel system in China. And that shows the Russians, of course, have their own, other than the mobile moving one that I have shown earlier. This is by Komor in Kazakhstan in 2007. They had that underground missile system. I do not know whether they still have them in Kazakhstan or not. There have been many encounters or challenges between the nuclear power states. So this is a Russian Tupolev 160 Blackjack bomber. It's shot out by a British Tornado F3 jet. And the fact that the Russians have the last week moved the nuclear devices to Belarus is not something new. This is a nuclear base in Germany, and each one of those big thing here is a missile silo, nuclear missile silo. This is a very thick concrete cover. You can visit one of those at the Chanute Air Force Museum in Rentoul, around town, if you are in Champaign-Urbana, around the University of Illinois. You can count 20 B-61. These are basically nuclear devices that have equipped the NATO countries. So the top of the silo there, look how thick the concrete, 10 feet of concrete, would move out on rails in this direction, and the nuclear missile would be launched against, Russia or China. And this is a picture of that B-51 standard device now carrying nuclear weapons. These devices, as you could see, 4 of them can be launched by an aircraft. So they're gravity devices in general. And they show you here the components that enter into that B-61 device. And they could see that each one of those components is built by a different company. So it's a high high industrial complex to supply and maintain those that weaponry. Stealth bombers, like here is the F-22, I think. No, that's the F-35. You could see that it's stealth fighter bomber because they don't have reflective surface except for the tail here, but the weapons are not carried under the wing. The weapons are carried inside the plane belly so that they cannot be detected by radar. And that shows us a launch of one of those B-61 mock devices. So the nuclear weapons situation is real as a threat to humanity. This is, again, a mock device of being launched from an airplane. That's an F-15. It's not the F-16 that is being promised for the Ukraine that you read about in the media. This is a GBU-28. That's an Earth-penetrating 2,300 kilogram device. So it would be launched against fortifications underground. It can penetrate the ground, having a uranium kind of shell, and then explode, destroying underground facilities, military facilities in general. Now, this is the situation of the arsenals that exist today, according to the Federation of American Scientists. And the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the United States had 400 of them, the Russian Federation 300, and 2 submarine ballistic missiles. The United States has 240, the Russian Federation 160, 60 long-range bombers, and for the United States, and 55 for the Russians. So the arsenals of the United States in strategic arsenals exceeds the one for the Russians. And so unfortunately, we're seeing today a new type of trench warfare, same as in the First World War. And here they're showing that soldiers can protect themselves from a 43 kiloton equivalent nuclear test. That's actual test in the Nevada desert in 1953. And this is a mushroom cloud from a megaton device. You could see how this is the curvature of the Earth. It can reach very high to the atmosphere. That was the Ivy Mike test. And the mushroom cloud rose into the atmosphere about 25 miles, so covering the whole globe. If you take the city of New York, a fireball of one of those devices would basically burn the whole city, the Ivy Mike device. A single device exploded over the continental United States can cause, as I suggested, electromagnetic pulse. In fact, there was a test of a 1.4 megaton named the Starfish device. It was exploded in the upper atmosphere, and it did not generate a fireball because the upper atmosphere is almost a vacuum, but it injected electrons into the Earth's magnetic field and generated the equivalent of an aurora borealis over the island of Hawaii, and it destroyed many of the street lights, in fact, on the Hawaiian islands. And that was 1,000 kilometers away, I think. That's, let me see. Is that mentioned here? It was a long way from Hawaii, and if you exploded on top of Hawaii, you would destroy any electronic devices that are in operation from the electrical currents that are generated by the very strong electric fields generated by the explosion. As I suggested, the accident has happened like the two nuclear devices dropped by the B-52. But recently in 2018, we had tensions with North Korea, and they were running a test program for civil defense in Hawaii, and on January the 13th, on a Saturday at 8:07 in the morning, and people panicked. Police asking people to go back to their homes. The program that was basically a test program appeared to be a real attack by North Korea, and it created a panic in the people in Hawaii. And a frightening part of that panic is that father here trying to convince his daughter to hide in a manhole in the street, supposedly to get protected from the nuclear attack from North Korea, which was nonsense. The North Koreans did not mean to attack us in any way. A single integrated operational plan, they call it the SIOP. That was a plan to counter what General Curtis LeMay, he was a general who took charge of the Strategic Air Command, the strategic bombers that flew up continuously up in the air, threatening to attack the old Soviet Union. And he intended to use strategic bombers to drop about 400 nuclear devices at most Warsaw Pact cities, over 40,000 population density in 1947. That would have included, today's Kiev, Warsaw, Prague, and would have wiped out surrounding countries like Finland from the fallout, and most of the US allies in Western Europe. So the same situation is again being considered here. The United States and the Russians withdrew from the intermediate nuclear force treaties, and they had signed that SIOP plan in 1960, but in October 2018, President Donald Trump suggested pulling the USA from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia that was created by the Reagan administration in 1986 in 1987. That raised the tensions even more between Russia and the United States. And that issue was that missile here, the cruise missile that was developed by Russia, the SSC-8 Novator. And so that we are closer to nuclear war with those Intermediate Forces Treaty. There have been treaty violations in terms of the low yield testing, and some people suggest that the United States intelligence agencies suspect that Russia has been secretly conducting low yield nuclear weapon tests in violation of the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and the international treaty prohibits this type of testing. Quote, the United States believes that Russia probably is not adhering to its nuclear testing moratorium in a manner consistent with the zero yield standard. Russia is suspected to have conducted a number of very low yield nuclear tests at its Novaya Zemlya testing in the Arctic region, and that creates even more tension between the United States and Russia. Okay, so what is the situation here? We talked about the different filters that humanity faces. We suggested that an astral impact that ended up the age of the dinosaurs 64 million years ago could be caused by humans if linking it to themselves. So it could become one of the filters that Enrico Fermi has warned us about. Other than an astral impact, now we are facing several filters. Global climatic change is one of them. gain of function research that creates biological weapons that we all suffered with the COVID-19 virus being suspected to have been, in fact, a biological weapon. We have facing us also the threat of nuclear war annihilating our civilization. There is a group in Madison, Wisconsin, named publishing a book, publishing a magazine called the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist. Actually, the group was founded at the University of Chicago in 1945 by a group of scientists who helped develop the first atomic weapons. In fact, they came up with what they call the doomsday clock. And the doomsday clock is shown here. Let me see here. That is 2015. And in 1949, we were very close to midnight. Midnight would mean, in that case, the end of civilization. And depending on what events happening over the world, they give civilization a warning. So in 1949, that was the first atomic test by the Soviets. 1953, the United States tests its first hydrogen bomb. So let's see what is 1953. You could see in 1953, we were 2 minutes before midnight. Midnight means a possible nuclear war that wipes out our technological civilization. We reach the same level again 2018 with the threat of climate change and nuclear concerns and that we are living today. So here is that same clock now in 2020. That was 3 years ago, and we were at 100 seconds before midnight. That's very close there. And again, it was climate change, nuclear and cyber warfare concerns now. They added to nuclear warfare, cyber warfare. And each year they issue that doomsday clock, and the latest one is shown here. We are 90 seconds to midnight. That was January 24, 2023. So the January of this year, we were only 90 seconds to midnight, or to doomsday, the end of civilization. So we should be aware of it, and of course be good advocates of eliminating the madness, basically, of politicians who think that either country, the United States or Russia or China, can win a nuclear exchange. The nuclear exchange would end up all of our technological civilizations. It will take us back to the Stone Age. In July 2017, more than 100 countries endorsed a United Nations treaty to ban nuclear weapons altogether. So that is what I mentioned is a campaign, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And the organization behind the treaty was awarded the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. Honduras became the 50th country, and the treaty took effect on October 25th, 2020. Dozens of countries had signed the legally binding instrument, the first agreement of its kind to explicitly ban nuclear weapons. And we are banning already chemical weapons. We are banning biological weapons, except for the COVID-19 virus, which was again suspected to be a biological weapon. But we should also continue. There is a treaty there available for humanity to adopt for banning nuclear weapons. The 2018 new nuclear posture review in the United States, on the other hand, goes in the opposite direction. It speaks of nuclear weapons as quote unquote usable. And the Russians, on the other hand, also say that their military doctrine suggests that if they have an existential stress, that they can use it. So there is a real real possibility that a nuclear exchange can happen as a result of the war in the Ukraine. So it basically politicians coming to their senses and finding a solution to the problem is something that would protect all of humanity. In 1967, there was a treaty called the Outer Space Treaty. It didn't contain any language that specifically prohibits the militarization of space, except when it comes to weapons of mass destruction like nuclear weapons. It is required that all states' use of the moon and other celestial body is for peaceful purposes. So that the Artemis project of NASA building a base on the moon and hopefully on Mars should include no use of nuclear weapons. The possibility existed that false warnings of incoming ICBMs could have resulted in a nuclear exchange. So there were many false warnings during the Cold War. President Reagan was very concerned about a false warning resulting in mass deaths and destruction. And successor government resurrected the Cold War, as we know that beyond President Reagan. General Curtis LeMay quotes comes to mind, bombing the Warsaw Pact nations, bombing them into the Stone Age. That should be realized in that nuclear weapon states capable of retaliation become immune to both nuclear and conventional attacks. That's one reason the nuclear power states have not abided by the terms of the NPT or the Non-Proliferation Treaty to reduce or to abolish, in fact, their nuclear weapons systems. It is naive to consider that nuclear weapons are like other weapons, designed and built to be used on the battlefield. The historical evidence suggests that nuclear weapons are in reality anti-weapons, designed to prevent nuclear as well as conventional weapons from being indiscriminately used in warfare. The historical fact implies that the nuclear as well as the latent nuclear weapon states are automatically elevated to the status of becoming immune to both conventional and nuclear attacks. From that perspective, nuclear weapons become conflict suppression tool, and that's what they should be regarded, that are not supposed to be usable in gaining advantage on the battlefield. From that perspective, nuclear weapons become conflict suppression tools. And now that would be a good thought about nuclear weapons. However, from the opposite perspective, and this is the prevalent perspective, it is indisputable that their incorrect use by mistake, by error, by brinkmanship, maybe also poses a mortal risk to all human civilization on Earth. And this is the consensus of people who know about nuclear weapons. The working dynamic globally appears to be a precipice rule, that's my opinion, which suggests that sides will argue, shout, and threaten, but back away at the last minute before falling into a precipice. However, in a nuclear world where the doctrines of MAD, mutually assured destruction, and nuclear primacy predominate, there is always a possibility for accidents, miscalculations, blunders, and brinkmanship, and the survival of the human species and its technical civilization are at stake. Military confrontation is excluded, and diplomacy and peaceful dialogue stand up as a rational survival alternative. So the existence of nuclear weapons poses an existential risk on humans, and we should all be aware and make other people aware of that situation. In the appendix 1, I have the short movie that I want to show, and you're invited to watch the rest of the movie. But in appendix 2, I list all the known nuclear explosion situation that happened, and some of the explosions look pretty from the photographic perspective. This is a mic test, I think, and all the there is basically a list of these explosions. Appendix 3 shows the anatomy of a nuclear explosion. It's frightening, and the level of destruction is tremendous, especially when it is exploded close to the ground. So the fireball rises up and creates a rotating kind of a torus as it rises into the upper atmosphere. But the neutrons would have affected the dust or the ground and vaporized part of it, in fact, and all these materials with the neutrons become radioactive, and then the cloud distributes itself as what we call fallout all over the Earth. So there cannot be a local, basically nuclear explosion. Any nuclear explosion will affect, in the atmosphere at least, will affect the whole Earth. And I go back to that movie that I invite you to watch. It was published in 1983. The name of the movie is War Games. And some people refer to it as the movie where the only winning move is not to play. It has to do with thermonuclear war and how two young teenagers basically helped the NORAD system avoid a nuclear exchange. So I hope that it can work, and I invite you to watch this. And let me see.
Neurologists are stunned.
It's only the ending of the movie that I'll be showing.
So
let's back up.
yeah, we already tried that.
Put it up. Yeah, put it up.
This is on a computer.
It's not on the list. Go ahead. It's gonna be in there somewhere. No, no.
It's a game of tic-tac-toe. Played with a computer that is launching a missile attack on Russia, and Russia responding to it as, with a response against the United States. It is
There's no way you can win that game. I know that. It doesn't. It hasn't learned. Is there no way to make it play itself? Yes, number player 0.
the person on the right is a professor who built that program for the missile defense of the United States. And they're trying to stop it from initiating an attack on Russia in that case.
How long status report?
It is considering different scenarios of nuclear exchange with Russia.
Throw a landline on them. And they kind of big on satellites.
The name of the computer program is Joshua. And this is the whole moral of the movie. I invite you to watch it. Nuclear exchange is a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. I hope our leaders can understand that. And that is the best strategy for nuclear war, is not to play the game. How about a nice game of chess?
Colonel Conley, take us to DEFCON 5. Okay.
And that is a happy ending that we would like all to see the nuclear power states end up in the threat that humanity is facing. I'm going to change the assignments to correspond to what we covered today.
Hi, I'm Jeff. Welcome to A Million Movies. And did you know that the 1983 movie War Games played a key role in raising awareness about cybersecurity and computer hacking? In fact, President Reagan watched the film at Camp David the day after the movie was released in the theaters. And the following week, during a meeting on national security, he asked if it was possible for someone to break into our computer systems. General John Vesey, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, dug into the question and found that not only was it possible, but it was plausible, especially since the U.S. government had been hacking into China's and the USSR systems for years. Cybersecurity became a key focus for the U.S. government. In the following year, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was passed to protect U.S. businesses and our citizens from unauthorized access to computers and computer systems. And that's the first of 16 facts I'm going to share today about war games. So if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Not only did war games lead to changes in cybersecurity policy, but it also helped shape the language of hacking itself. For example, war games only this changes everything.
Oh boy. I'm losing contact here. The class is dismissed. Thank you for your attention. And I'll be in the chat room answering any question that I can answer in the chat room. Okay, I'm sorry about that shared screen being dismissed, but the notes contained whatever was missed in the conversational part. Yeah, an interesting question. If Russia uses a tactical nuke on Ukraine, should the United States use one on Russia or not? Again, Russia would be totally, it is not advised for the Russians to use nuclear weapons, but they suggest that if they face an existential threat, that they'll have to use it. So for NATO, the main strategy should be not to create an existential threat so that Russia would not be compelled to use nuclear weapons in the first place. Should the United States use one on Russia or not? The situation with the treaties that exist today unless the Ukraine joined NATO, there is no treaty obligation for the United States to come and join a nuclear war against Russia. And in fact, people in the United States, because the retaliation would be simply tremendously large, that suggests that we are compelled to help both sides reach a compromise. And that should be the emphasis of the Ukraine itself, Russia, as well as the NATO nations. A nuclear war would escalate beyond control, and there's people who suggest that the nuclear war is winnable, both on the Russian side and in the United States, are totally misinformed. They're advised to read about the level of destruction that can happen, and that it can basically affect all humanity, not just the Russians, the Ukrainians, or the United States, or the NATO nations. So that is what I would answer that question with. We pray to God that they're smart enough, and we should inform anybody in the decision-making process in the United States that their suggestion that they can defeat Russia in a nuclear war is totally unfeasible. Saying Jezit to everyone. Where are the office hours? The office hours is after the lectures in the chat room. That what I'm doing here. I'll stay for as long as it takes. If Russia uses one and the United States does not respond to it, everyone else will be developing nuke. That's an interesting comment, because then it makes nuclear weaponry usable in warfare. And as I suggested, it's a force kind of amplifier. It should nuclear weapon should be there to avoid both conventional and nuclear war. When will the first exam be? I'll figure out a date and post it on the web page. And Owen Flaherty. Oh, yeah. I'll for Jizion Young. Yeah, I'll. We have to cover a few chapters before I can set up a date for the first exam. We have covered only 2 chapters so far. Who can see your? Okay. Any other questions in the chat room here? Please, if you have questions on the assignments, our wonderful TA has posted his office hours. Reach him by email. Maybe he can give you his phone. But email would be the best approach that he favors. Derek Chang to everyone. Thank you.